Hey, I decided to do another horror franchise review. I did Friday the 13th, so I'll move on to Nightmare on Elm Street. Just to go ahead and give the heads up, I am not doing the. I know I did the remake for Friday the 13th, but that was a good remake. Nightmare on Elm Street's remake, not so much. And it was to a point where I was just so annoyed with that film. And I will touch upon it, but very briefly. But just want to let you know I'm almost skipping that one, and I don't own it, and I don't intend to ever own it. Moving on to the ones I do own. Nightmare on Elm Street, 1 through 4 is the set, but I will do it one by one. The original Nightmare on Elm Street is, in my opinion, the best made Nightmare on Elm Street film. I think it is still the best one made, and they had hardly any money for this film. Like, the entire New Line Cinema studio, they basically, if Nightmare on Elm Street had not been the hit it had been, we wouldn't have New Line. We would not have Lord of the Rings as we know it. It's pretty much, the house that Freddy built, according to, that's pretty much how the studio calls itself, and for good reason. And this movie is just creepy. And I love horror films that are creepy. I like ones that don't rely solely on jump scares. I don't hate jump scares, but I do hate when that's all the film has to it. Nightmare on Elm Street, the original one, has the creep factor. It doesn't rely on the jump scares. It has them, but it doesn't need them. It uses them the way they need to be used. And because of the location of the film, which is pretty much, a dreamlike version of reality. So basically, Freddy is not going to be just, you don't worry about Freddy in the woods. You worry about him being in your room. He could be on your street. He could be anywhere because he's in your head. I like that idea, and that's what makes Freddy kind of creepier than most slasher villains is you can't really get away from him. He's going to catch up to you eventually, and he's probably going to kill you before you can even think you can do any damage to him. And this film, he is very sadistic, slightly humorous, but not to the degree he gets in the sequels, but still, I tend to have a bit of a sadistic sense of humor. So I'll admit, some of the dark humor that Freddy has in this film, I giggled, because I'm pretty sick and twisted when it comes to humor. I have my limits, but weirdly enough, Freddy surprisingly did not test my limits on dark humor. But still, a movie that can creep me out, give me the chills, but at the same time, I can watch it over and over again. It was very well made, and it's considered a classic and a masterpiece, and when it comes to the '80s horror films, and deservedly so. It was a unique, original idea that hadn't really been truly tackled before until then, but has been copied or referenced numerous times since, for good reason. Robert Englund is Freddy, and I mean, I would like to have seen what the film would have looked like with David Warner as Freddy. For those who don't know David Warner, you do. If you're my generation, you just don't know that that's who it is. David Warner, 90s kids would know better as the voice of Ra's al Ghul in the Batman animated series. He was also the Loeb from Freakazoid. He was that scientist guy in the second Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. So you've seen him around. He's even the villain in Beastmaster 3, which was a made-for-TV movie. So that's a little rare. But a lot of the older generation know him from a film called Time After Time, where he played Jack the Ripper very well. He almost was Freddy. And Probably would have done a great job. Probably wouldn't have done a job like done it like Robert Englund did, and that might have not have been as successful or not attract the same kind of fan base, but still would have been interesting to see. But I'm glad Robert Englund got it and took it to where he took it because it was amazing. And this wasn't Robert Englund's first brush with fame, because he was also doing a miniseries called V. So if you've ever seen the original V miniseries, yeah, Freddy Krueger's in it as a friendly alien. Go figure. Also, I found out not a couple years before getting the role of Freddy, Robert Englund actually tried to actually auditioned, I think, for Han Solo, or at least something like that, because he was friends with Mark Hamill, and I think he's the one who told Mark Hamill, hey, there's this space movie they're doing that you should try out, or something like that. So I find it kind of funny that we got Luke Skywalker thanks to Freddy Krueger. Okay, but yeah, the first movie is also the debut of Johnny Depp, who came to California to be a musician, but his, you know, I don't exactly know why he auditioned for this movie, because, like I said, his goal was to be a musician. He never acted before, and honestly, I think he's never really been that crazy about it. I think he prefers music, judging from his decisions and what he does as far as his career goes. But he happened to get a ride from his buddy Nicolas Cage and show up and auditioned. And Wes was kind of like, I don't know. But Wes's daughter and her friend had sat in on the casting for this role and said, oh, no, you have to go with that Johnny Depp. He's dreamy. And Wes is like, okay. And yeah, next thing you know, Johnny Depp makes his film debut. And he gets sucked into a bed. And then apparently Freddy does what a blender does to most things and shoots out the bed. It is a glorious, wonderful effect. The effects on this movie are amazing considering the budget they had. The fact that they were able to pull off the things, and even things that should look silly can still come off creepy because of the way it was shot and the way it was done. And it's just like, this film is one of those films that should have failed, but goodness, they did such... they just worked so hard on making this look great that they managed to pull a miracle and made the film that, you know, pretty much started everything New Line Cinema would go on to do. Main, you know, the biggie being the Lord of the Rings films, but still, it's awesome. And then Nightmare on Elm Street 2 has some creepy scenes. Freddy's still very dark and menacing. He gets a little bit more one-liners, but he's still not the jokey Freddy of future films, thank goodness. The makeup change I'm okay with. I like that it's made to look more kind of like the makeup effects. Kevin Yeager, he went with a male witch, you know, like the stereotypical classic, you know, evil type witch, you know. So, you know, the appearance of Freddy's face in this film is a little different than it was in the first film, but it's effective. I liked the idea that Nancy's house still has Freddy's presence in it, which is how he's able to even, you know, do what he's doing after being defeated in the first movie. But I actually can buy his return in this film as, you know, he was defeated in that house, so he's still kind of stuck there, kind of haunting it. And he's trying to come back to he's wanting to enter the real world through this boy named Jesse. And I think by doing it through someone instead of just being dragged out, I think he's not as weak as he would be if he had just been drug out like he was in the first movie. And that's my reasoning for why he wants to possess someone. Sort of like a shield to keep himself from getting, beaten like he was by Nancy. That's my guess. But honestly, it was just something to try out. Apparently, the writer, David Chaskin, wanted to include subtext because at the time, the AIDS scare was a big deal at the time, and so he thought it'd be an interesting idea to have some homosexual subtext in it. Unfortunately, the director unintentionally made decisions and inserted things, and I think one of the prop guys saw what was going on with the subtext and threw in some props and stuff. So there's these things that made the subtext, not so much subtext so much as in your face. Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's Revenge is considered one of the gayest horror films of all time. And if you ever watch the film and you see some of the things they did, it's just like, yeah, that's pretty gay. But it's still all right. It's definitely a departure from what would come after and what would happen before, but I think there's still enough creepiness to it to where it's an okay film to check out, but once again, it gets weird. It gets real weird. So be prepared for that. The third Nightmare on Elm Street movie is probably my favorite. It is a fan favorite for a lot of people, and it's not just because I'm a Dawkins fan, for those who have seen the movie and know about it, but one of my favorite bands is Dawkins, and they have 2 songs prominently featured in the film. In fact, one of the songs was written specifically for the film. But anyway, I'm going to focus on the film. I may do if I start doing music reviews, I may go into Dawkins in that, but right now I'm going to focus on the movie, I swear. But the third movie, Dream Warriors, excuse me, Wes Craven comes back. He opted out doing the second movie because it's like I got rid of Freddy was defeated. I know the studio head wanted to tack on a little but is he gone ending, but that's not how my movie was supposed to end. As far as I'm concerned, I'm done. But when it came time to do the third movie, Wes was convinced to, at least write a treatment. It was very ambitious and very big and out there, and might have been a little too much money to make. So they had some other writers come in and kind of bring it down to something a bit more manageable, but there's still a lot of Wes's influence in it, and you can tell that even with him not actually being there, that a lot of his influence was definitely strong on this film. Dream Warriors has an interesting cast of... whereas in the second movie, we kind of focused just really on one teen and 2 or 3 of his friends. This movie, it's really a group, and Nancy comes back. In the first movie, we're not quite sure what happened to her at the end because of, Nightmare on Elm Street. It's kind of hard to tell what's real and what's not, especially the ending of the original film. But 2 says she went nuts. 3 says she got help. So it actually doesn't contradict each other. I see fans wait, I thought she went crazy in the second one. Well, maybe she did, because in the third movie, she's become a psychiatrist, and maybe she did go nuts, and part of her recovery was becoming a psychiatrist, studying psychology and learning about, the mind and dreams and stuff, and also discovering the magic of hypnosil, the stuff that keeps you from dreaming, which honestly would be Freddy's worst nightmare, but unfortunately, Nancy seems to be the only one who actually thinks it's a good idea to take the stuff. Our kids are dying in their sleep and they blame it on their dreams. There's a drug that can, stop them from dreaming? Too dangerous. We'll just let them die in their sleep. Which is kind of the mindset of these idiots in in this film. I never been fond of authority per se, because despite being rather law-abiding, rule-following young man, I've still been screwed over by the system here and there. Mainly because and even like I'll have evidence proving my innocence and still kind of get, slapped on the wrist and be like, so a film like this where nobody's believing these kids and it's costing these kids their lives, just it drives me nuts. So I'm not fond of the adult characters in this film, even though they are the characters are well-meaning. Once again, it's that whole thing of you're doing more harm than good with your good intentions. And this film, the final kids of Elm Street that are still alive, Freddy's trying to finish them off, and because of, them trying to tell people that, a boogeyman's trying to get them, they've been committed to a place called Weston Hills, which is pretty much a lunatic asylum. But it's a facility, but it's a loony bin. But, these kids are having to deal with Freddy and try and survive him, but Nancy comes to kind of help them out, and she doesn't know Freddy's back until she gets there, but the moment before you even see her, the moment she steps in, it's when one of the girls is saying the Freddy rhyme, and she finishes it, establishing, I know what you're going through. And it's just like, it was a perfect entrance for her. So Nightmare on Elm Street 3 brings back, a well-beloved character. Freddy is at his best in this film as far as like one-liners and still being threatening and still scary, but very funny and entertaining at the same time. This is Freddy at his peak, and this is also the franchise really at its peak. I mean, 4 has its fans, but 4 was beginning of the downhill slope. 3 was the top of the hill. That was like, this is what we're got. It's got a great soundtrack. It's got great acting, great characters. The effects are amazing. It was one of those, everything was done right. So 3 I highly recommend, not just because it's my favorite, but it is very well made. It's up there with the original and New Nightmare as far as being well made. Now we come to 4. I have mixed feelings about Dream Master. On the one hand, rockin' soundtrack. Lisa Wilcox, who plays the main girl, great job. Very well-developed character. Freddy's starting to be more jokes than scary, but still has his moments. Visually, the film looks good, but it's definitely gotten a little more goofy. It's getting a little weird. And it's not as good as 3, but it's still interesting. It's still worth a watch, but it is kind of the beginning of the end. Where 5, which is what I'm moving on to now, 5 is definitely almost a reverse of 4, where 4 was like mostly good but starting to look bad. 5 is mostly bad with little bits of goodness in it, like the backstory into Amanda Kruger, Freddy's mother, is explored in 5 a little bit. Really disturbing, really sick and twisted, and definitely suiting the Freddy character. So that made sense and was well done and very creepy and disturbing. Lisa Wilcox does the best she can. Unfortunately, it's in this film, so she's, can only do so much in a film like this, but she definitely puts a very good effort in continuing her character from 4. Freddy's more jokey in this one. while he is still killing, he's not quite as threatening. He doesn't kill as many people, and he can't even kill Alice, his main girl, because he needs her alive for his plan, which is he's trying to be reborn through her unborn child. Yeah. But, yeah, 5 definitely was not... It's one of those films you could skip and not really be missing anything. So 5, you can if you're a completionist like I am, but if you don't have the desire to complete the series, you can skip it without any judgment from me. Trust me, 5 is just a misstep, and knowing what happened behind the scenes, which was pretty much, this movie was made very shortly after the 4th one, very quickly, not a lot of money, and they hired a music video director to direct it. It was just silly to think that this would turn out good. Now, the next one had the time, had the resources, but unfortunately, the idea was poorly executed. Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, which is bullshit. This is not The Final Nightmare, but that's kind of a horror movie trend. Freddy's Dead. It's a guilty pleasure film for me. I think it's horrible. Just terrible. But I love it. I actually do enjoy Freddy's Dead because it's the worst, probably the worst of the original Nightmare on Elm Street movies. It's just, they were trying to make a black comedy this time. They weren't even going for horror in this movie. They were going for dark humor, which I like. Hence why this is kind of a guilty pleasure for me. They do try to go into Freddy's backstory a little more. And they try to do some things different. They try to move Freddy out of Springwood, out of Elm Street. They do try to do things different. They have some interesting cameos. And it's not a good farewell for Freddy, but it is a fun little ride if you are not wanting to take it seriously. This is not a film you take seriously. If you take it seriously, it's just total shit. But if you look at it for what they were trying to do, it's okay. And I will admit there is an Alice Cooper cameo in it, so that also kind of helps me be a little biased towards the film, but not by much. Now, I don't own Wes Craven's New Nightmare, but I have Netflix, which has Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I don't know if I can really count it as an official part of the series because it takes place in the real world. But in the real world, there's a demon that attached itself to the Nightmare on Elm Street series, like the form of Freddy, and took it, but was unable to really do any evil or harm because the films kind of kept him in check. The story was being told, so it kept him from doing anything. At least that's sort of what's going on. It's a little... Wes Craven has come back, and he really went cerebral with this film. It's really like thinking man's horror, and while I enjoy it, I thought it was brilliant. At the same time, that may be why I didn't do that good when it came out as far as financially, because a lot of times when you go to see a slasher film, you're not going to watch it in the hopes of, developing a deep conversation about the metaphysical and whatnot. No, you're there to watch people get slashed up, and if that's what you're going for, you're going to be disappointed. If you're wanting a psychological thriller where, fiction and reality are mixed and confused, and it's really trippy and out there, and you really got to think, this is for you. And it's well made. It's really well done. but it is very deep and psychological. So it just depends on how you like your horror. If you like it deep and thoughtful, it's for you. If you prefer just see someone slashed to bits, it has that, but very, very sparse. And Freddy's scary again. I mean, I know it's technically a demon, but it's Freddy. Robert Englund plays himself and Freddy in this film, which I find kind of hilarious. But when he's in full like Demon Freddy mode, I wouldn't want to meet that in any sense. I don't care if it's just Robert Englund having fun. I would not want to meet that incarnation of Freddy ever. I don't want to meet Freddy anyway, but still, that incarnation would be my... But that's the one that scares me the most. The new Nightmare Freddy is probably the most terrifying he's ever been. I believe I already covered Freddy vs. Jason in the Friday the 13th reviews, but just to touch up on that, still same opinion on Freddy vs. Jason. When we actually had Freddy vs. Jason, it was awesome. Unfortunately, we had the Dawson's Creek style drama sparsed in between those scenes with Freddy and Jason that kind of make the overall film kind of drag. But once again, when they are together and when they are fighting, it is awesome. And Robert Englund is having the time of his life doing this role. You can tell he's having fun with it, especially since it technically is his last time as Freddy on the big screen anyway. Ugh. The remake. Jackie Earle Haley did a great job as Freddy. Unfortunately, that his performance was trapped in that remake. The remake could have been done so much better. It was. I think there was an over-reliance on CG. You have especially the wall, and I think that's the thing that most fans remember from the remake. That wall effect, where in the first movie, done for like $5, way more effective, way more creepy, way more real looking. And here you have like what was probably like $1,000 effect that just looked stupid. It was stupid looking. What the hell? And that kind of sums up, a lot of that film. It's like these decisions were made that just didn't make sense. Nothing against Rooney Mara, but I almost fell asleep watching her performance of trying not to fall asleep. She's done better work in other films. This was kind of like a phoned-in performance. The boyfriend, blah. I mean, the characters were just... The only character you really was, like, into was Freddy. Which, I mean, that's a good thing for a Nightmare on Elm Street film. And, well, once again, Jackie Earle Haley did a great job, surprisingly. I mean, I knew he was... I liked him, and I thought he was a great actor, but I'm like, come on, Robert Englund is Freddy. But then I saw this film, and I'm like... if this was a better film, I think people would be giving Jackie Earle Haley a lot more credit, because he did great. He was fantastic. He was terrifying and still had a bit... I would have liked him to not be more jokey, but have a little bit more glee and less anger. I know Freddy's on a revenge motif, but Freddy likes his work. Being burnt to a crisp actually might have been the best thing to happen to him as far as he's concerned, because it made him into this dream demon creature, and he likes being able to do what he does. So the only thing I would change about Jackie Earle Haley's performance is have him have a little more fun with the character, but not by much, because he still does have that aspect to the character, just not as much as I would like. But honestly, I don't see him having any problem really, getting into the fun of the character. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll see that again because of how bad the remake did. They might not ever do one again, at least not for another decade or two. And even by then, they probably won't ask Jackie Earle Haley back. Robert Englund is kind of like, look, I'm getting too old for this stuff. I was getting winded on Freddy vs. Jason, and I'm about a decade older than I was then. We're almost on, yeah, yeah, it's almost been 15 years, since Freddy versus Jason. So yeah, I could see why Robert Englund's not exactly crazy about getting into the whole thing again, though he has mentioned he just might have one more movie in him. So hey, we might get another one with Robert Englund, which that's fine. But if they did another one with Jackie Earle Haley, but with completely different crew than that remake, I would trust it to at least give it a try and see what happens. But what we got, they could have done so much better and actively did not. I mean, at least with Friday 13th, it felt like a Friday 13th movie. This felt like a film trying to be a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but not really caring enough to really sell it itself as such. So that's Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Mostly downhill slope, unfortunately. But boy, when it was good, it was good.